So this will be our boat for the evening today. This is what's known as a rigid hull inflatable boat, otherwise known as a rib. All it refers to is the big rigid hull that lines the middle of the boat. The big bouncy thing that I'm jumping on right here does not actually provide any flotation whatsoever. This is a glorified bumper, so if I were to bump into anything, we would just bounce off like a giant trampoline. Don't worry, we will not be. This is actually the most dangerous part about today, is actually getting on the boat over the top of the sponson. For that, there's three main ways to do so. Excuse me. The first way, I will note before I do any three that none of them are graceful, so just flop on. As long as you guys flop in the boat, not in the water, I'm happy. With that being said, the front of the boat's more of an exhilarating ride. It just goes up and down with the waves a little bit more. Whereas the back of the boat's more calm, steady, and as close as well. We do have an emergency kit on board and a flare kit if anything were to happen. If Sue were to come and nick you in the arm, I'd be able to patch you up on board. Just sit back while we take off here, guys. Get comfy. Start today's tour though by just kind of acknowledging that today we'll be exploring and traversing along the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. Off to our left-hand side here in Kitsilano Point, my home, started off actually originally as a Squamish village, of which we're forced to move farther up Howe Sound, where we will be checking out a little later today with the expansion of Vancouver. Likewise, on our right-hand side, we have Granville Island, that we all know and love. Granville Island appears as it did not always. Rather, before European settlement, Granville Island consisted merely of just two sandbars, of which housed the Tsleil-Waututh fishing village on top of. Now, these indigenous communities live with a natural harmony with the land and the sea and the animals thereunto. Unfortunately, this harmony did not last long, however, as with the expansion of European settlements in the area, and when George Vancouver came to Vancouver charting and mapping and setting it up for this European settlement, many of these indigenous communities were forced to move. With that, Granville Island started to take shape as not what we now know and love as Granville Island, as an industrial center for mainly logging and fishing. Now, this logging, fishing, industrial hub transformed during World War II into more of a military-industrial complex. Now, this military-industrial complex rapidly changed and became largely abandoned, unfortunately, after World War II, as the machinery was no longer needed and big supplies, and so it left Granville Island largely abandoned. This gave the British Columbian government an opportunity to transform all these industrial warehouses into what we now know and love as Granville Island, as a restaurant tourism, bars, theaters, and kind of just anything you could ever imagine. That's why if you travel throughout Granville Island, you often note the industrial-esque warehouses that house a lot of these marketplaces and restaurants. And if you actually go and check out in any of the buildings, you'll see in the rafters above or in the ceilings above a lot of industrial machinery from this time before, kind of just dating back and kind of reminiscing about what lived on Granville Island before it became what it is today. Now, throughout the entire tour today, guys, I'm going to be using a bit of a clock-like metaphor just to direct your guys' eyes around. So with that, 12 o'clock will be directly in front of us right here. On our right-hand side will be 3 o'clock, and our direct left-hand side will be 9 o'clock. Don't worry, I won't talk about 6 o'clock because that is directly behind us and it makes no sense. But to start things off, at 12 o'clock here, right in front of us, we have Burrard Street Bridge, otherwise known as the gateway to Vancouver. Symbolic of the two big pillars you can see that line either side of the bridge and that really frame the city in behind us here, giving it that gateway name. Now, these two pillars actually just act as big cover-ups for the steel frames that lie within them. Now, this bridge was opened on Canada Day in 1932, and the Queen of England herself thought it was such a momentous occasion that she commissioned a Royal Canadian Air Force seaplane to fly underneath the bridge in 1932. Pretty daring feat, considering the technology at the time. Unfortunately, seaplanes no longer fly under the bridge, but we do have another pesky species. As you can see on our left-hand side at around 10 o'clock, we have some pelagic cormorants lining that stone right there. Pelagic cormorants, I will note, as we travel under the bridge, are known to digest their food relatively quickly, and so if you are looking up into the rafters, I recommend doing so with a closed mouth. As a sardine smoothie is never a good way to start your evening. Now, luckily, we have survived the danger zone. We will be going back under once more, so hopefully we survive on our way back in as well. But to start things off, on our right-hand side here, we have one of the happiest places in all of Vancouver. We have Dog Beach. Now, Vancouver is home to one of the highest canine per capita rates in all of the world. Because of this, Vancouver invests a lot of money into getting our canine friends in the water as much as possible in as close proximity to our human friends will like. That's why, as you see Dog Beach span all the way along the right-hand side here, you also see Dog Beach transform into what is the Sunset Beaches. Now, the Sunset Beaches are at 2 o'clock right now, and the Sunset Beaches offer an amazing view of the sunset that we will be seeing a little later tonight, that just disappeared beyond the mountains in the distance in front of us here. Now it's enjoyed by tourists and locals alike, and it's also the home of many different festivals and concerts. We have 420 at Sunset Beaches, and we have the end of our gay pride parades here. We also have a variety of concerts that play year-round on the beaches of Sunset. Now with that, Sunset Beaches were actually created by mistake in Vancouver. The rock groins that you can see that line and create kind of little inlet beaches here were actually set up to prevent against erosion from the lands of the city of Vancouver. Instead, they had the adverse effect. Soil sediment and soot from the Fraser Valley River flowed into the inlets and little pockets that they created, creating marshy-like beaches that are very unnatural and that are very kind of mushy-like and very unenjoyable. Now, the city of Vancouver responded to many complaints about the mushy-like texture of these beaches by importing white Californian beach sands that you can see on tops of all the beaches around the Vancouver area. Coupled with this, they also import Californian palms, which are definitely not local to the area and often do struggle, albeit this is the time of the year where they do thrive the most because it is also the warmest time of the year. Now, when it is super low tide, you can actually see the natural gradient of the sand going all the way from the low seawater level all the way up to the very top of the beaches, where it's the very enjoyable nice white beach sand. Now, you might notice people walking, biking, or running beyond and behind the beaches on our right hand side, and then on our left hand side you might notice some more people doing the same thing. This is actually all one continuous pathway known as the Vancouver Seawall. Now, the Vancouver Seawall is one of the longest uninterrupted marine-like pathways in the entire world, stretching roughly 28 kilometers or 19 miles. Now, with that, if you are interested in checking out any of our dog parks or human parks and beaches alike, our Vancouver Seawall can take you all around Vancouver, all the way from the cruise ship terminals in Cool Harbour out to a distant point on our left-hand side in UBC and Point Grey. It really provides a level of accessibility to the area, but also a level of erosion prevention, as Vancouver is sitting often on top of various different limestone deposits, which are very easily erodible, and so they need to protect the natural land of the city of Vancouver using this seawall. Now, on our left-hand side here at around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, you can see a triangular building with a triangular glass roof on top. This is at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock now. This is the Vancouver Maritime Museum. Now, the Vancouver Maritime Museum offers an excellent expose into the various explorations that occurred throughout the province of British Columbia, but it's also the home of a famous ship known as the St. Roch. Now, the St. Roch was the first ship to circumnavigate North America, traveling for the first time from west to east through the Northwest Passage, and the most Canadian way possible, getting stuck in the Canadian Arctic sea ice for 2 years, relying on indigenous populations to survive, before eventually heading all the way down south through the Panama Canal and all the way back up to Vancouver, where it is currently housed today. It's really amazing. You can go, and if you check out the Maritime Museum, you can actually check out the ship itself by being on top of the ship. You can climb around the various cabinets and get a sense for what it would be like to live in one of those ships of the day, just exploring the area. Now, up to our right-hand side here, at around 2 o'clock, we have a green tower with a live oak tree sitting on top of it. So this is a very important building in the city of Vancouver. This is known as Eugenia Place. And Eugenia Place, the live oak tree that sits on top of it, is meant to celebrate and commemorate the height of the old-growth forest trees that once lived around the entire province of British Columbia before they were eventually cut down during European settlement and expansion. One thing I like to do is I like to look at the height of that live oak tree and then look off into the landscape behind it and around it and imagine what that landscape would look like with trees the height of 30-story buildings, what their old-growth forest really looked like during the time. And unfortunately, all these old growths were really cut down in front of us here during European settlement to make and create the city of Vancouver. With that, before we are about to take off, I do want to just ask one question. Are we ready to speed up, guys? Woo! Oh, we can do better than that. Are we ready to speed up? Woo! Well, with that, welcome to our first stop, guys. Right in front of us here, we have what is Stanley Park. Now, Stanley Park is the #1 attraction for Vancouver on TripAdvisor, and for pretty good reason. You could just about do and see just about anything you could ever imagine in the province of British Columbia within Stanley Park. Only 10-minute bike ride away from downtown Vancouver. The center of downtown is this amazing park right here. You have a continuation of our seawall that we saw that wraps around the entirety of Stanley Park as well, that you can take as you make your way all the way from Falls Creek all the way out to Cole Harbour as well on the other side of Stanley Park here. And with that, this Stanley Park is actually 20% larger than Central Park in New York City, one of the largest urban parks in all of North America. With that, there's some magnificent white sand beaches like the one you can see on our right hand side there at around 3 o'clock. And just around the corner we have another beach that's just like that, except for it also has a children's pool at it if you weren't here with children. If you weren't here with children, however, I would definitely recommend checking out our nice craft brewery within Stanley Park. Or even if you were looking for a nice romantic getaway, you can take one of our horse-drawn carriages throughout the entirety of the park as well. Now, Stanley Park here was actually always designated and protected as a natural wildlife place, but not for the reason you might think. It's not necessarily just for the park itself, but also for the trees that once lived in this park. Stanley Park used to be a haven for old-growth forest trees, of which were protected by the Royal Canadian Naval Forces. Now, it was protected by these forces largely because our Navy would actually cut down and use the old-growth forest trees that lived in Stanley Park for ship masts. And so it was very industrial uses that needed to be protected long-term, and so this was their first form of protecting old-growth trees, albeit to use them later on to build our ships. Now with that as well, there's an amazing rose garden in Stanley Park that you could check out, and it's actually the largest rose garden in all of British Columbia. And if you're interested in what's swimming below us right here, I would recommend checking out our Vancouver Aquarium. Vancouver Aquarium was actually the first public aquarium in all of Canada, and if you're worried about the humanitarian nature of aquariums around the world, Vancouver Aquarium is the aquarium for you. That's because our Vancouver Aquarium is actually run by Oceanwise as a conservation and education platform. Many of our animals there actually need to be there. We have 2 brand new seal pups this summer, both of which are half blind and would not survive in the wild without the Vancouver Aquarium. With that, maybe not so local species, but something I would definitely recommend checking out. We have an amazing penguin exhibit at the Vancouver Aquarium as well. Now, definitely not local to the area, but you can never go wrong with some penguins. Right in front of us here, we have some pretty magnificent limestone white cliffs. Now, limestone is a very easily erodible rock, and so the seawall that you can see that loops around, that these guys are nicely skateboarding along, people are walking along, it's actually meant to prevent against further erosion from this limestone cliff. Now, this rock that's directly in front of us here stands pretty prominently outside of the cliffs. That's because this rock directly in front of us, known as Siwash Rock, is actually volcanic basalt. It's different than the limestone cliffs, and it's only found from volcanoes. And so there's 2 theories about how this rock came to be here. The first is that it exploded out of Mount Baker in Washington State and landed right here. Another being that a dike in the ocean crust opened up, sending magma rushing to the surface through our cool sea below us right now and cooling into the rock that it is formed right in front of us. Now, Siwash Rock gives you a good idea of just how everything can live and operate on all of our surfaces within the temperate rainforest that we are within. As you see yellow algae that lines the entirety of the rock, and with some nice trees and a bush on top, the bush still living. Unfortunately, the tree died in a heat dome. Now with that, Siwash Rock has actually a bunch of indigenous stories about it, mainly because there used to be an indigenous community within Stanley Park known as the Shway Shway. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to share these indigenous stories with you. However, Vancouver Water Adventures is working with the Squamish Chief to be able to share these with you. We're only a couple weeks away from being able to implement them. Now, instead, in the meantime, I'd definitely recommend checking out the indigenous walking tours that take you throughout the entirety of the park and offer a really good kind of storytelling experience of what really lived here before European settlement came, and also what lived in the city of Vancouver and around the coastal areas before Europeans here. Now with that, we will make our way across the bay here. Before we do, I just want to ask, how are we all enjoying it so far? Thumbs up all around, amazing guys, thank you, that's all I can ask for. With that, we will make our way across the bay, so just sit back and enjoy the ride. Guys, welcome across the bay. We actually just commuted through the 3rd busiest shipping channel in all of North America. That's largely because Vancouver is home to the third largest port in all of North America, only behind New York and Los Angeles. As you can kind of see through the first narrows there, off in the distance with the big crane gantry systems. Now, directly in front of us here, we have what is West Vancouver and Ambleside Beach. Now, West Vancouver is one of the most expensive communities in all of North America and is the most expensive community in Vancouver. Average prices around here can get up to almost around $3 million on average, which is just double that of the rest of the city of Vancouver. Now, with that, this actually did not always used to be. This used to be just cottage country and summer cabin country, of which was largely inaccessible from downtown and to downtown because they had no real bridge that connected them to downtown. And so in the early 1900s, a very well-known family from Europe came across. Has anyone ever enjoyed a nice pint of Guinness before? Yeah. So the Guinness family actually came across to Vancouver looking for investment opportunities, and in the 1930s they bought up the entirety of the hillside developments that you can see on our left-hand side up Mount Cypress there. Those are known as once the British properties, and they bought the entirety of that hillside there and started to develop it. And they started to develop it mainly as cabins at the start, and then they wanted to kind of increase their land values, and so they tried to figure out a way to increase accessibility to downtown. So they turned in the 1930s during the Great Depression to the city of Vancouver and asked them for a bridge. The city of Vancouver very aptly responded by saying, we don't have any money for a bridge, it's the middle of the Great Depression. And so the Guinness family actually proposed a new thing. They proposed to build the bridge using the local help of local laborers to stem the tides of the Great Depression, costing them $6 million. And so they modeled it after the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, painting it green to give a nice Irish flavor to the city, and what's known as Lionsgate Bridge right in front of us right here. Now, Lionsgate Bridge was actually operated and owned by the Guinness family throughout the 1960s, of which it used to be a toll bridge, and if you go across Lionsgate, you will see the old tolls that used to be there. Now, they sold it back to the city of Vancouver for $6 million because the increased accessibility to downtown meant that the rest of their properties skyrocketed in value, and so they didn't actually have to sell the bridge back for any more than it cost them to make it. With that, they returned to operating the bridge just for a couple years during the 1980s so that they could add lights to the top of the cables, making up one of the key features of the Vancouver skyline, night skyline. Now with that, when they built the bridge, the entirety of West Vancouver transformed. It transformed into more developments. Now, West Vancouver didn't have much accessibility before the bridge, and so there was not much place for commerce here. And so they actually have an industrial ban in the entirety of West Vancouver, making it an ideal place to find and develop and invest in a residential community. Very attractive to the Guinness family, and only more attractive by more accessibility. Now with that, they really transformed the entirety of West Vancouver, and so all these developments that we can see here are as recent as the 1980s. There was no towers here before the 1980s. It was all just small homes that were slowly developing over time. Now with that, we will continue to make our way along West Vancouver, and as we do, please just enjoy the architectural homes of some of the most amazing houses in the community. Because West Vancouver is one of the wealthier neighborhoods in Vancouver, it means that famous architects from around the world can come here and really give their minds an opportunity to transform houses into what makes use of the natural resources around the area. That's why West Vancouver is home to very kind of intricate homes that make up much of what the natural resources are in West Vancouver. And so you'll see a lot of wooden homes, wooden structures, making use of what we would find in West Vancouver before the homes were there. With that, Arthur Erickson developed mass developments along West Vancouver as well. So please check out all the homes as we make our way around, and really enjoy golden hours. This is probably the coolest time of day to check out a city. Now with that, we will continue along the coastline here, so just hang back, hang out, relax, and enjoy the ride. Right here in front of West Bay, and for this West Bay stop, I actually want to turn our boat to a little bit of a spy boat. We're going to do some spying on some nice local celebrities around the area. So I'm just backing us up for a second here, but I want you guys guys to check out this really magnificent house on this point here. It's really beautifully built. Now, I want you guys to follow that house just to the tree on the right-hand side, and then all the way up to the very top of the tree. You might see two bald eagles. Some local celebrities. Bald eagles tend to nest in one location for much of their lives, unless it's disrupted by us humans. You can actually hear them crying right now. But they tend to nest in one location for most of their lives, and they also tend to mate for life. And so what we see right here is actually a mated pair. Now, they have an interesting courtship ritual when they are trying to find a mate. Bald eagles are one of the highest flying birds in the entire world, and so they'll actually fly up to really high heights, up about 2 to 3 times higher than the mountains we can see in the distance here. And then they'll lock talons, they'll lock claws, and then they'll nosedive down to the ground, spiraling as they get closer and closer to the ground before, at the very last second, one of them will release and then they'll fly back to each other. Biologists have actually found the remains of 2 bald eagles that have hit the ground. Found some skeletons of them. Now, the saying goes that the first eagle to release the talons does not wear the pants for the rest of the relationship, as the other one usually tends to be a little bit more gutsy. At least that's the saying. Now, with that, these bald eagles are pretty magnificent in size. Their wingspans can range all the way up to 2 meters, which is just about as tall as I am. And I know that's not saying much, but hey, I can't change it. Now, because they're just completely massive birds, they require really big nests, and so located on the top of that tree there, it's kind of hard to make out, but they actually have a nest located on top of that tree. Now, if you want to get up close and personal with bald eagles, this might be one of the coolest jobs you can have. In every nature park around North America, it's someone's job to actually go and find bald eagle nests and to either knock them down or decrease their size, because bald eagles nests can get all the way up to 2 tons in weight.
Wow.
And if a hiker is walking along a path and gets hit by one that's falling down, that can be catastrophic.
Wow.
And so it's really important that they constantly monitor the size of these bald eagles' homes so that they don't fall down on people. And so that gets you really close and personal in the homes of these bald eagles if you're interested in that. Now, with that as well, we have some Americans on board, and bald eagle is your national bird. Understandably so, it is pretty alpha bird, but it's actually more commonly found in Canada. And with that, it was never actually intended to be your national bird. Mainly because, yes, bald eagles are alpha birds. They're competing with orcas and grizzlies throughout the entire world for their food, but they're also competing with trash pandas as scavengers. Bald eagles are scavengers, and so they'll eat whatever they can find. The American government at the time didn't want American people to have that reputation as scavengers, and so they tried to opt to the turkey. Understand that the turkey's maybe not the most glamorous of birds, and so they resorted back to the bald eagle. Albeit, if you do hear a bald eagle's cry in a movie, it's usually actually not a bald eagle's cry, as we just heard. It's rather a hawk's cry that is being taped over, as a hawk's cry is meant to be more prominent and a little bit more kind of top dog than an eagle's is. Now, with that, we are going to continue on here, but as we make our way farther into West Bay, I want you guys to check out how close all the homes are to each other. Now, these are all mega mansions around this entire area, and all these homes here, if you have an oceanfront view in West Vancouver, your house can get all the way up to $5 million. If you have oceanfront access, that number can go all the way up to $25 to $30 million. And with that, you could be super close proximity to your neighbor with that expensive of a house. The reason why is because back when this was cottage and cabin country, many of the cabins and cottages were really small, and so they needed only really small land sizes and lot sizes. Now, through all the developments and through the increased accessibility to downtown Vancouver, all these homes started to grow, but the lot sizes didn't. And so all the homes that you see right around us here are actually situated on the original lot sizes that once were during the cabin and cottage country times, but with now 4 times the size homes as what once was. Now, with that, we are going to make our way now to a distant point behind that freighter off in the distance there. So as we do, please feel free to just sit back, relax, and enjoy all of what West Vancouver has to offer. As this is the community that's really recognized most as sea to mountain, sea to sky. And this is one of our wealthiest and most kind of prosperous communities in all of Vancouver with that. So please enjoy, and away we go. magnificent park we have in front of us right here. Now, does anyone want to guess what the name of this park is right here? There's one key distinctive thing that is named after. Lighthouse, exactly. This is Lighthouse Park. Lighthouse Park actually was designated as the ideal ground for a lighthouse all the way dating back to George Vancouver when he came and started to map and chart the area. With Vancouver Island off to our left-hand side here, this lighthouse is in prime position to be seen throughout the entirety of the Georgia Strait. Now, with that, the original lighthouse that once stood here was made of all wood and had a oil lamp light inside that was magnified using mirrors. Does anyone want to guess what happened to this original lighthouse? It burned down and it was replaced by this nice lighthouse that we can see right here that I'm trying to keep the sun behind. Now, this current lighthouse has an LED light inside of it, and it actually does not need a lighthouse keeper to run, just like unlike the older ones that do. And so there's plaques now for the old lighthouse keepers that once lived in the area to keep track of the old lighthouse that line the sides of this lighthouse in front of us. Now, this whole park here also once belonged to the Royal Canadian Army, mainly because this big bunker we can see right here, right in front of us with the big graffitis, was actually used during World War II. Does anyone want to guess for what? It was used so that they could actually see what ships were entering into English Bay. Basically, the Canadian government was worried that a Pearl Harbor was going to happen in Vancouver Harbor, and so they set up 3 of these bunkers. One in Siwash, one here, and then one directly behind us in Point Grey and UBC, so that these bunkers, can use triangulation methods to be able to figure out where a ship is where a ship is going using the course, and also how far it is offshore. If they only had one bunker, it'd be like looking at a 2D image to figure out where it was going and how far offshore it was, and so they needed 3 to be able to figure out all these measurements, all these key measurements. Now, in behind in the trees there, you can actually see some homes. These were the barracks for the workers that once lived and operated these bunkers during World War II. Today, you can actually rent them out. It only costs you $400 to rent that out for a month. Albeit, here's the catch. There is a 70-year wait list. 3 o'clock at the top of that tree there, probably scouring the sea below us and around us. Okay. That eagle can also see you guys better than I can see you guys, even though it's all the way up there. Whoa. Mainly because eagles have 8 times stronger vision than that of humans. Now, with that, eagles can also see up to 1 meter or 2 meters below the surface of the water here, and so it is likely scouring for fish just below the surface and around us right now. Now, with that, you can actually see eagles swim when they catch a fish, as most of the time, once they get their feathers wet, they can't actually fly off the water surface, and so you'll see them flap their wings in a swimming-like fashion, especially once they've caught a fish. It's quite a special feat to see, but if you do see it and they have actually instead caught a fish that's a little too big for them, they can actually drown themselves as well using this, because their talons won't release until they're back on land. And so eagles have been known to drown while swimming because the fish that they've caught is just too big. With that, we are going to be making our way now around Point Atkinson and Lighthouse Park. And as we do, I want you guys to just check out the rock around the area and just the coast of all of Lighthouse Park, especially as we make our way around the corner here. This is what the entirety of the British Columbian coastline looks like. You could take this exact image right here on the right-hand side and transform it up and down the entirety of the coast, and that's what it would look like. It's rocks like these that enter into cliffs right into the ocean front. And how these form and how this landscape is transformed is because of glacial ice shelves that once covered the entire area. We're now going to be entering into Howe Sound. Howe Sound is a glacial fjord, of which used to have 2-kilometer high glacial ice shelves that carved through it, making it what it is today. It's also the second southernmost fjord in all of the northern hemisphere as well. And so as we make our way into Howe Sound here, really just check out the entirety of the mountains on either side of the waterway. They enter like cliffs right into the water. It's quite an amazing feat. And with that, we will make our way now, so please do hold on and enjoy the ride. Alrighty guys, we are entering into a protected marine life sanctuary now, and so I am going to slow us down. And as I do, I want you guys to scour the rocks, and especially close to the water lines, as there's a really amazing seal that is able to camouflage into the rocks very well. Now, I'm going to do my best to try and find some. Sometimes they're not always here, especially around high tide, mainly because seals actually sit on rocks so that they can regulate their body temperatures, and so during high tides there's less rocks to do so, and so seals tend to be in the water during this time, often feeding. So sometimes you might find them in the water hanging around. Oh yes.
Oh, I see it.
So there's one behind us here that's in the water, so I'm going to back us up. Oh wait, no, there's a couple more just in the water now by the rocks there. You can see them by their bobbing heads. So they're not always on the rocks. They're only on the rocks usually to rest and warm up from the cool sea. And so you do see them in the water. Seals like to hang out in rock areas like this, mainly because seals are natural predators or orca. And orca are way faster than seals are. And so, but seals are much more agile than orca are. And so when a seal hangs out in rocky areas like this, they can outmaneuver an orca. And they can outmaneuver any attacker that comes into the area. With that, these areas also tend to be shallower than where orca hang out, and so these are protective areas for these seals. That's why seals you'll often find during in and around rocky areas. Now hopefully some more appear and pop their heads up. But you guys probably noticed that they had really cute noses and cute faces. Maybe something that reminded you of something you might have at home. That's because seals are distant ancestors of bears and dogs. Divers, and when they dive for 30 minutes at a time, hopefully one pops up for us shortly. When they dive for up to 30 minutes at a time, they can get down to almost 600 feet down. Now, to get this far down, they have to reduce their buoyancy, and so to reduce their buoyancy, they actually exhale all the air out of their lungs. Now, that might seem counterintuitive, but this allows them to reduce their heart rates to 10 beats per minute. Sitting around 10 beats per minute, then they draw on the reserve oxygen they have in their bloodstream and their muscles to survive at super deep depths.
Wow.
Now, hopefully one pops back up. They're probably swimming right underneath us right now. Seals are able to camouflage into the rocks really well because they have darker backs and lighter bellies. Oh. Their darker backs, it's a form of evolution. They've developed this coloration so that they can actually hide from orca while swimming in the water as well when they're not in rock groins like this. Their darker backs, if an orca were swimming above them, their darker backs would camouflage into the darker sea below them. And likewise, if an orca were swimming below them, their lighter bellies would camouflage well into the lighter sea above them. And a very good camouflage technique. But unfortunately, this means for us as well, is that these colorations are natural for rocks as well, and so it makes it hard for us to see these seals. So seals are known as the Labradors of the sea. If you've heard the name sea dogs before, that's also another name for seals. It's actually the original name for seals. That's mainly because of two things. One is if you take an x-ray of a seal, the x-ray of a seal is identical to that of a Labrador, albeit they don't have legs, they have flippers. That's the only difference. And with that, they're actually said to be the Labradors of the sea because they'll come up and they'll cuddle with you, they'll bump into you, they'll play with you when you're in the water. Now we'll go and check out the nice homes that we were checking out before with the big glass elevator. What I was saying before is that that house was rumored to once be owned by Will Smith, but in Vancouver we actually have a strict code on not being able to know who lives where. Oh, really? And so unlike California, who have their celebrity walking tours where you can go and walk around celebrity homes, that's not even possible in Vancouver because we just don't know where anyone lives. Vancouver's filled with seasonal cottages, especially around West Vancouver, because of the expensiveness of many of these homes. It just means that they're largely unaffordable, except for a very select few, and this select few can afford a lot of homes around the entire world, and so most of the houses in West Vancouver are seasonal. With that, it means that Vancouver is undergoing and has continuously undergone a housing crisis because there's just no open homes in the city of Vancouver, and so that's why you see big towers popping up even far away from downtown. You might have noticed some big developments and big towers even outside of downtown Vancouver, and that's because downtown Vancouver's completely maxed out. The building codes there have maxed out, and you can't actually build up anymore in Vancouver because of the building codes. And so they've needed to go elsewhere and to help out for this rising housing shortage. Now we will slowly walk our way back to the seals and just say hi once more as we make our way out. Hopefully they pop. Seals have whiskers on their noses. You might have seen them. And it's so that when they go to depths of 600 meters deep, they can't see anything because the water is too dark, and so they use their whiskers to detect water currents in the water so that they're able to feed at super deep depths where they can't actually see anything as well. Now with that, we will slowly make our way. Now, as I mentioned earlier, seals tend to hang out on rocks to regulate their body temperatures, and so during high tide they don't hang out on the rocks because there's not much rock for them to hang out on. Now, regulating their body temperatures pretty much just means that when they're hanging out in the water for too long, they get super cold and their blubber can't keep them warm for that long, and so then they sit on rocks to bask in the sun for hours on end. Now, with that, we will start to make our way back and have to say see you later to our flipper friends. And as we do, I just want to thank you guys once more for coming out today. Having amazing guests like you that come on trips like this gives me an opportunity to explore areas that I've grown up in and just do things that I've always loved to do, which is just be on the water and taking in the amazing sights that we've been seeing here. So I just want to thank you guys. This is not the end of the tour. We will be checking out Tankertown. As we make our way back in, I will do a bunch of little loops so you guys can get a good view of the sunset just disappearing behind us as well. So please just sit back and enjoy the ride and really take it in. For those of you going to Victoria shortly, Victoria is directly 1 o'clock from here, and you can kind of get a good sense of how magical Vancouver Island is as well. But with that, we will make our way. So just hold on, sit back, and enjoy the ride. Directly in front of us here we have what is called a geared tanker. You can see some people on board. Please give them a nice big smile and wave. Any of the people that work on these actually don't leave the ships for their 6 to 12 month periods.
Wow.
Really, because getting a visa for Vancouver is very expensive, and if they're only sitting here for a little bit of time, then they don't do it. Now, my first question is actually, why do you think all these cargoes all these freighters are sitting right here in English Bay? Any question? Second question. How many people do you think are working on this ship right in front of us right here? Actually, it's only 12. It's relatively inexpensive to pay the wages of the 12 workers to sit here for weeks on end. At least it's less expensive than to possibly miss your slip time in the port of Vancouver and get fined. Pay the wages of 12 workers to sit here for weeks on end, just so that they're not late or delayed or missing their slip time. This one right in front of us here is what's known as a geared tanker. You can see gears with the big cranes that you can see.
Okay.
Now, off to our kind of 10 o'clock, you can see an ungeared tanker without the big cranes. The difference between the cranes and the non-crane tankers, the tanker can actually load and unload itself in any port in the entire world. It doesn't need big gantries or crane systems to load or unload it, because it can do it itself. Whereas the one off in our distance at our 9 o'clock actually needs those big crane systems at the port, so it can only go to a very select few ports around the entire world. They can be registered from all around the world. We have a lot registered out of Panama, just because a lot of them travel through Panama. Well, I mean, we have we've seen Norwegian ones, we see Indian ones, we see Malaysian ones. We get them all around the world, mainly because Vancouver is the 3rd largest port in North America, and so just about all you can imagine that comes in or goes out of Canada goes through our ports, and so all these freighters go all around the entire world. They'll have a couple people that come and deliver food to any port that they stop at. It's pretty shallow in this certain region just because we are close to the Spanish Banks, and Spanish Banks is just a big beach stretch that is pretty shallow all the way out here. You can actually, at super low tide, you can take a paddleboard, you can walk out for 500 feet from the beach, walking out, and then you hop in a paddleboard for like 100 feet and you can be at this freighter right here. If the geared, these ones can just go to any port in the world because they can unload and load itself, so it's not about numerous. And of course these ones are probably more expensive to upkeep just because you have to have the systems all running properly. Now with that, there's 4 actual kinds of freighters. There's these 2 that we can see, the geared and the ungeared tankers. You'll also see cargo ships. You'll see sometimes geared cargo ships, but those are very rare. And then you'll see you'll see one that's called a ro-ro, which is roll on, roll off, and that's a car transport freighter. We saw a bunch of them at the beginning of the summer. They look pretty much just like giant tankers that are like double the size of that tanker we can see. But with that, we have to make our way back home. So as we do, I'm gonna spin our boat once more so you guys can get a good view of the sunset. It really doesn't get much better than this. We are making our way back in now, so as we do, please enjoy the Vancouver skyline. Actually, very directly in front of us here, you can just barely make out a mountain just behind the skyline. That's Mount Baker. That's in Washington State right there. That's in the USA. And with that, away we go. Actually pull us backwards just to give you guys a little bit more of a longer lasting look at the sunset as we cover through our slow zone here. Off to right in front of us right now, we have directly in front of the Maritime Museum, we have Wooden Boat Marina. Now Wooden Boat Marina is a specialty marina only for boats that are wooden and 60 years or older. They're designated to the specific little area mainly because wooden boat owners are thought to be more conscientious boat owners than the rest of us. And so they're given their own little marina separated from the rest of Falls Creek. Now with that, on our sunset beaches on our left hand side here, you can see a lot of people gathering just for the sunset that we were just checking out. Now, roughly at our 11 o'clock, you might see a rib-like structure on the beach just to the right hand side of that stone bunker. Okay. Just sitting right on the beaches there. Does everyone see that rib-like structure? Yeah, this is what's known as whale ribs. Okay. And in Vancouver invests a lot of money into their art installations, and whale ribs was installed in 2009 for $500,000. Likewise, there was also a chandelier installed really recently for roughly around $800,000. And why I bring up these dollar amounts is because at our 1 o'clock there, you can see the Coast Guard station that I mentioned as we were coming out here. Now, our Coast Guard station is the second busiest in all of North America, only behind Long Beach, Florida. Wow. And in 2013, only 4 years after whale ribs was commissioned for $500,000, our Coast Guard station shut down. What? Mainly because of a spat between the local and federal governments over who would pay the $700,000 yearly fee to keep it running. Now, considering the large sums that they pay for their art installations, this felt like a bit of a slap in the face to us mariners, and that local Vancouverites, or the local Vancouver government, valued beauty over safety. Now, don't worry, with VWA and on our boat, especially here today, you guys got both beauty and safety, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, off to our right-hand side here, you might see some red and white tents. Yeah. We also have a drum circle on Sunset Beach occurring right now, which is a common occurrence on Sunset Beach. But the white and red tents, this is a part of our famous professional Shakespearean festival known as Burrard on the Beach. Now, Burrard on the Beach runs from July to September in Vancouver, so you guys are here for the right time, as they're running shows all year round, or for the 2-month period right now. And in it, they play 4 Shakespearean plays every summer. Now, the 4 they're playing this summer, of the 4, they're doing a modern take on Macbeth. Now, I say modern because I don't know how else to characterize it. Pretty much the entire cast is dressing up as goblins. Sounds really cool. I want to check that out. I don't know how they're going to pull that off, but... Now, off to our right-hand side as well, at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, right in front of our Coast Guard station, we have Vanier Boat Launch. Now, Vanier Boat Launch is a really important boat launch for Vancouver Water Adventures, as this is actually where our company began. We began with a brother and sister renting 2 Sea-Doos off Craigslist out of the back of their pickup van. Wow. And they would come and launch them right here. That was only 9 years ago. Wow. And through the help of amazing guests just like yourselves, we've been able to grow our fleets into the largest Sea-Doo fleet in all of North America at a 60 Sea-Doos, or one of the largest, at 60 Sea-Doos. We also have 3 boats like the one you're on today, and also a variety of kayaks and stand-up paddleboards. Now, if you did enjoy your time on the water today, but you felt like we went a little too fast for you, perhaps you're more up for the leisurely cruise, we offer amazing kayak and stand-up paddleboard opportunities such as tours and also rentals. And if you have yet to learn yet, we can do lessons for you as well. The tours take you out throughout the Falls Creek area. I'm also a kayak guide, and so if you did happen to take a kayak tour, maybe you'll get me. With that, if you feel like we didn't go fast enough for you today, I would really recommend checking out our Sea-Doos as well. Our Sea-Doos, we do rentals, we do tours that take you all the way up, even farther into Howe Sound than we got today, up into Burrard Island. Now, with that being said, we are going to be making our 2/3 of their body weight in fish every day, which is a pretty substantial amount of food every single day. And what goes in must come out, and so please mind me as we do pass underneath the danger zone, as I've made it all today without getting bombed, and I kind of want to continue that. Vancouver had a World's Fair in 1986, of which Canada Place, our cruise ship terminal, got the sails on top, and also at the very end of Falls Creek here, we got Science World, of which is now called TELUS World of Science, but no self-respecting Vancouverian is ever going to call it that. It is Science World forever and always. And that was included in the World's Fair in 1986. And when I say Falls Creek, I talk about Falls Creek because it's actually not a creek at all, hence the word falls at the beginning. Rather, it's a tidal inlet, of which was 3 times larger than it is today, but through various reclamation projects, it's shrunk into what we now know and love as Falls Creek, ending with an amazing point at Science World and leading us all the way out into English Bay. Now, directly in front of us here, we have what is Granville Island once again. And if you are checking out Granville Island anymore tonight, perhaps for a theater show or for a nice bar or for a nice drink at Bridges right here, I'd recommend you check out in the rafters once more, as within the rafters there's a lot of industrial machinery from the times before when it was an industrial island. Now, Bridges Tap and Barrel right here is actually also the first place you can get a beer or have an alcoholic beverage outside in all of Canada. That patio right there was the first place in all of Canada you could enjoy an alcoholic beverage outside. And I know this because one of our boat captains this year was actually the chef at that time when that was first introduced. If you did enjoy your time on the water today and you were perhaps interested in getting a boat yourself, or perhaps interested in docking it in Falls Creek here, I would recommend getting your name on the slips today, as it is a 10-year waiting list. And so with that, some locals have adopted a buddy up system, as we can see by these 2 sailboats just on our right hand side here. The buddy up system offers an opportunity for boat parties. And with that, as we are making our way into dock here today, guys, I do want to note that, as I mentioned, we are a family run business, and because of that, we do not have the biggest budget for marketing. So if you did enjoy your time on the water today, it really goes a long way to share your experience with friends, family, or anyone you think that would be interested. And with that, tips and reviews are very appreciated, but never expected. And so if you did feel like you had a 5-star time today, my name is Mac, or Macaloo. But if you feel like you had a 4-star time today, my name is Graydon. And I do want to thank you guys once more for being an awesome crowd.
Woo!
This was a blast. I hope you guys enjoyed the sunset. As we make our way into dock here, we'll kindly ask you guys to remain seated just until I've tied us off. And we'll be ready to go. We'll make our way all back together to the office. You know, amazing. You guys are ready to get off. Pull the boat right ahead.